Jean-Paul Sartre. Now there's a name. He was a novelist, a playwright, a public intellectual, and honestly one of the most challenging and influential thinkers of the entire 20th century. His philosophy, well, it really forces you to look in the mirror and confront some pretty huge questions about your own life, starting with one you might not even realize you're asking yourself every single day.
I mean, think about it. Throughout your day, you're a student, maybe you're a parent, you're a friend, an employee. We all have these different hats we wear. But are any of those roles really you, deep down? Or is it all just an act?
Sartre had a brilliant term for this whole phenomenon. He called it bad faith. And his classic example? It's a waiter in a Parisian cafe. You know the type. His movements are just a little too crisp, his voice a little too formal. He's not just doing a job, he's playing the part of a waiter so perfectly that he's almost become a caricature. He's deceiving himself into thinking that's all he is.
Now, let's be super clear here. Having a job is not the problem. The bad faith kicks in when we fool ourselves into believing that role is the entirety of who we are. It's when we take our dynamic, conscious, ever-changing self and pretend it's a fixed object. You know, like a rock. A rock just is. You're not a rock.
And this brings us to a really crucial distinction Sartre makes. On one side, you have being in itself. That's the world of objects. A rock is a rock. It has a set purpose, a fixed nature. But on the other side, you have being for itself. And guess what? That's us. We're conscious. We don't have a pre-programmed essence. We are always in the process of becoming something new, defined entirely by the choices we make.
So this all leads to Sartre's single most famous idea, the core of his entire philosophy. Existence precedes essence. Think about a paper knife. Someone designs it with a purpose, to cut paper, before it's ever made. Its essence comes first. But for humans, nope. We're just thrown into the world. We exist first, and only then, through our actions and our choices, do we define who we are, what our essence is.
Now you might be thinking, this all sounds pretty abstract, right? Stuff for a philosophy class. But for Sartre, this wasn't an academic exercise. This idea of radical freedom and total responsibility was hammered into shape in the fires of one of history's darkest moments, World War II.
And his experience wasn't secondhand. In 1939, he was drafted. By 1940, he was a prisoner of war for 9 long months. And as soon as he was released, he goes right back to an occupied Paris and helped start a resistance group. He was right in the thick of it.
For Sartre and everyone living in occupied France, this wasn't some coffee shop debate. This was their daily reality. In a world where every single choice, what you said, who you talked to, whether you acted or stayed silent, could literally get you killed, this idea of freedom suddenly became terrifyingly real.
And that intense experience led Sartre to write this absolutely wild sentence. I mean, just think about it. How could anyone possibly claim to be free under a brutal military occupation? It sounds completely absurd. But Sartre meant something very specific.
What he meant was this: when all the normal rules and social niceties are stripped away, you're left with a raw, fundamental kind of freedom. Every single choice suddenly has immense weight. Every word you spoke was a total commitment of who you were. In that extreme situation, people had to define themselves, not by their jobs or their status, but purely by their actions.
Okay, so fast forward years after the war. Sartre is now a global figure, and he's about to make a public choice that would become the ultimate expression of this philosophy he'd lived his whole life by, his refusal to be defined by anyone but himself.
The year is 1964.
Sartre is at the peak of his fame, and he gets the news. He's been awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. I mean, this is it, the biggest honor a writer can receive.
And then, he does something nobody saw coming. He turns it down, flat out refuses it. He became the very first person in history to voluntarily say no thanks to the Nobel Prize.
So why? His reasoning was pure Sartre. To accept the prize, he said, would be to let himself be turned into an institution, a monument. It would be accepting a label from the outside that would try to fix his identity in place.
You see what he was doing? By refusing the Nobel, Sartre was refusing to become a being in itself. He wouldn't let himself be turned into a static object defined by a gold medal. Instead, he made the radical choice to remain a being for itself, always dynamic, always free, always in the process of becoming.
This absolute commitment to freedom, both on the page and in his life, is what really cemented his legacy. a legacy that is all about facing up to the incredible and sometimes terrifying weight of our own freedom.
And Sartre's influence is, well, it's immense. As a leading voice of existentialism, his work is foundational. You have the super-dense philosophy of being in nothingness, the gripping novel Nausea, the claustrophobic play No Exit. These works completely changed modern literature, philosophy, and politics.
And really, at the heart of it all is this one idea. We're free precisely because we are not a fixed object. We are just consciousness. But here's the catch. This freedom isn't some gift. We're thrown into the world totally alone with what he calls the unbearable necessity of having to create ourselves from scratch. No guidebooks, no excuses.
And that leads us to his most powerful, most famous phrase, "We are condemned to be free." It's a condemnation because you can't escape it. You can't escape the responsibility for your choices. And yeah, that is a huge weight to carry around. But in that very same thought lies all of our power. The power to create our own meaning in a world that doesn't come with any.
So I'll just leave you with this, a question that Sartre's entire life and work poses to every single one of us. If you're not a static thing, if you're not just a sum of the roles you play, then what are you? Are you truly, really the author of your own life?